Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Lloyd Gordon. I'm the founder and CEO of Kloud, a specialist Workday recruitment company. Welcome to webinar number 6, which we've titled COVID-19 and the Effect on the Partner Ecosystem. Thank you so much for everyone who's attended. The format of the webinar is going to be, we're going to discuss certain topics with our guests here, which I'll introduce in a moment. And then I'll open it up after every topic for Q&A. So on the bottom of the webinar, you'll see an option for Q&A. Please write all of your questions in there or the chat bar, and I'll make sure we cover as many as we possibly can. And without further ado, we're very lucky to be joined by 2 industry partner heavyweights. Nothing to do with your weight, guys, but I would see you both as definitely as heavyweights in the partner ecosystem. So thank you very much for joining us. Brief introduction: Matt Lawrence and Thomas Schroeder from Alight Solutions. Guys, can you give us a quick 30-second introduction of yourself? Matt, we'll go with you first.
Thanks, Lloyd. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. So Matt Lawrence, I've been in the Workday ecosystem for just over 10 years now. So was involved in very early days of Workday expanding outside North America. So involved in numerous Workday projects in the early days. Been with Alight one form or another that whole time, although we've had a couple of different names and acquisitions, divestments, etc. So really good to be here today. Hoping to give you all a perspective from our side, being on the partner side of the fence, how things are different and how things are the same. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And Thomas?
Thanks, Lloyd. Yeah, happy to be here as well. Echo Matt's sentiments. Good to be talking to you all virtually in what we all consider the new normal. I've been in the Workday ecosystem for just under 10 years, solely focused on the financial side of the house. So here at Alight, I run our global practice as it relates to our Workday Financials implementation group. And so I've had the opportunity, like Matt, to be involved very early on. I was actually in the first class of resources certified in Workday Financials. For those of you following the old format, it was actually version 11. So it's been a few years, but I've had the opportunity to really see Workday Financials grow throughout that time. So I'll talk a lot as well today, just kind of the perspective on the finance side. Of course, we'll talk general project and impacts and partner impacts and those sort of things that Lloyd mentioned, but you'll hear me bring a lot back kind of to the finance side of the house.
Yeah, I think that's something that we'll cover as well during the webinar. So topic 1, it's obviously COVID-19 and the impact on the partner ecosystem. When I look back to January, we, as an organization, we really heavily invested to grow extremely hard in 2020, as I know you guys have been doing over the years as well. And we all foresaw, if that's a word, that 2020 would be a fantastic growth year, not only for us personally, both Kloud and Alight Solutions, but also for the Workday ecosystem. And then early on, we had this COVID-19 thing come to the world, and it's changed everything, isn't it? And we can't help but be impacted by it. What sort of impact has it had on you guys specifically?
Yeah, so I'll kind of kick it off, and I'll give 2 perspectives here, Lloyd. One is actually us, Alight, as an organization, and then I'll dovetail that as well into kind of the partner portion of it. Specifically though, Alight Solutions, we are a global consulting firm. We are actually Workday's largest professional services firm using the full suite. So we use financials, we use PSA, we use HR, we use payroll in the applicable countries. And so we actually had to pivot as an organization through our deployment. We went live 4/1. So I think, if we were having this conversation a couple months back where everybody was scrambling to try to understand how to work in a virtual environment, obviously to now where most folks are comfortable that are working, or folks that are thinking about a project or trying to understand lessons learned so they can be as effective as possible. So, us as an organization, we had to pivot very quickly. And this is obviously a good lead into a lot of the topics we're going to talk about today, but kind of this concept of how to shift what tools, what do you need, what changes, what stays the same. And I think us as an organization, we saw that firsthand. So those familiar with the standard Workday methodology, we were right in the middle of end-to-end testing of our final phase of our Workday implementation. We very quickly needed to pivot. Yeah.
That's your internal project, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, exactly. So our internal implementation, had been ongoing for a little over 2 years. We had phased it based on geography and a lot of other impacts, as a lot of companies look at during an implementation. But we had to shift very quickly, right? And I think the biggest piece, and we'll talk about this too, more just kind of the phases in a project where we have the most impact. So, us as a consulting firm, we've worked in that space of remote delivery for almost 10 years. Our approach and our model really was always focused on leveraging cloud infrastructure to its fullest. So, our typical implementation strategy would really be an 80-20, meaning we would only be on site working with clients 20% of the time at key phases in the project that are really needed to run a successful project, and 80% working remotely, right? Not billing our clients just to be in the building, right? Billing our clients and working with clients around the key activities. So the big one for us was really teaching our internal team. So, what we found really quickly was, our consultants, which are Workday experts or process experts, had to shift pretty quickly to explain how we do it on a daily basis to our internal finance, HR, payroll operational team internally at Alight, how to actually stay engaged on a 8-hour webinar, right? Or why not to do an 8-hour, video conference, and what tools you need to use to stay connected, how to avoid bandwidth issues of, doing too much with the kids at home while watching Netflix, right? Like the typical things we were all dealing with. So it was very much a crash course in understanding what our clients are dealing with. And so for us, a lot of it was, how do we shift operational readiness? How do we shift training? How do we shift post-go-live support structure to have enough people to make sure that the internal team felt supported, got supported they need without them sitting in the room with them? So it's something that was very interesting for us that we had to shift pretty quickly, really overnight, as we as Alight shifted to a fully remote working environment.
Yeah. What sort of challenges did you face? Because not only have you got many implementations going on during this at the start and obviously during where we are now, but also you've got your own implementation and the challenges that you would face as a consultancy doing an implementation for an end user. You've also got that internally too. So
yeah,
what real big issues did you have?
Yeah, so I'll cover Alight, internally as a company, and then, Matt, love you to weigh in as well on what you've seen, with external clients. I think the first was just where to start, where to go, and it's kind of a culture concept. So you're in a project, your clients are typically all in the same building or buildings, depending on the geographic dispersion of the organization. But for us at Alight, very large infrastructure. We are globally headquartered, for those who aren't familiar, after our spinoff from Aon in Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. And so we have a very large complex. So for us, Lloyd, a lot of the challenges initially were, our finance operation, our payroll operation team all sit in the same building, right? Several hundred individuals. So it was as easy as popping in down the hallway into the office to ask a question when we needed help and support. So that changed really quickly to, oh yeah, where do I go? How do I call them? Do I write them an email? So it's kind of that like order of operations of how you go about communication, which we see now as a very big shift in the beginning of the project to kind of set those expectations. So a little bit was, we were used to one way of working, and then we had to pivot very, very quickly. So that was probably the biggest challenge. So a lot of the changes were moving from, the on-site to daily stand-ups. So we did a lot of different work stream daily stand-ups where we're meeting every day in the morning, quick touch point. What are the daily tasks and activities? You have the consulting as well as the internal team to give that internal team the comfort level of where to go and how to go and an understanding of what they needed to do on their daily tasks. So that was kind of the first piece. The other for us, we handle a lot of sensitive client data. So we have to dial into a VPN, right? We have to log into a VPN to access certain activities. So we as a firm felt a lot of challenges initially with the volume. You're talking how many hundreds, thousands now individuals all using the VPN. everybody using video, everybody sending emails, et cetera, et cetera. So we had to actually do a technology infrastructure overhaul to expand bandwidth capability for our organization to make sure folks weren't, seeing some of those technology challenges. So those are probably the first two that we faced that were, obviously things that could be solved, but just not challenges we had anticipated prior to shifting to a remote environment.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Infrastructure upgrade. I know we as an organization, all of our systems are on the cloud, but we never really used video calling, if I'm honest. And now every single day, it's almost like, because you still want that one-to-one FaceTime with someone. And I think video calling is, of course, the only way you can do that, certainly with a customer at the moment. And we've almost done that shift from having to sometimes go abroad to Germany, France, US, wherever we was going to visit a customer, to having that FaceTime via Zoom, like what we're doing now, right? So interesting, very, very interesting. And I can bet some of your customers have had some issues with upgrading infrastructure to support the new way of working as well.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that. It's also a very cultural thing as well. I think the shift has been more of a change management impact in terms of, everyone all of a sudden was stopped from going to the office. And, we've talked about the new normal, that kind of stuff, but people were having to adjust to being at home, potentially kids at home, potentially partners at home working at the same time. So there was an awful lot going on when things really started to get locked down. And we saw the same pattern, as different countries locked down at different times, first in Asia and then across Europe, Spain, Italy. And I think we saw exactly the same thing, that actually there was a lot of kind of backpedaling, adjusting, trying to figure things out, trying different tools, trying ways of working. And I think everyone is now pretty much in the groove with it. All the attendees on this call doing different web conferences day in, day out, and video calls is now the norm, and we're all used to it. But I think for me, it was that adjustment period from when it started to probably the first month before people really got into knowing how these things operate and how things are different.
Did things go on pause for a little while everyone? I know certainly in the UK, we never really knew what was going to happen until Boris came out and said, right, everyone stay at home. And it's like, well, how are you gonna conduct your work? And I know on Monday it was like normal. But we as an organization, we're a relatively small organization of 30 people. Whereas you guys, you're 15 odd thousand people, I guess, now, and some of your customers, bigger organizations, change management and issues on that first week and the second week of having to continue like BAU must have been a nightmare.
Yeah, it was. And interestingly, as an organization, we actually took the directive internally to not go onto site, not go to offices, not go to customer site before it was officially, government policy in a number of places, UK, US, etc. Yeah. So we kind of saw this coming and said, well, we already do a lot of remote work, as Thomas said, 80% of our projects already. So we decided as an organization pretty early on that we were going to adopt first, get ourselves ready. Thomas talked about the upgrades within VPN, etc. So we kind of foresaw that and then made the steps ready to do that. So when everyone else then said, right, now it's official, we're all going to work from home, we're already doing it and getting used to it.
Yeah. I guess you've rightly said it was an 80-20 model. And I think when I was talking to you guys the other day, I've been doing started the company 5 years ago, as you know, right? And my specific background has been mainly in Oracle and then SAP, of course, mostly on-prem implementations. And one thing that I was really stunned, if I'm honest, it was about the amount of implementations in the Workday ecosystem that can be done remotely. When you qualify a vacancy, especially when we started recruiting for you guys, it was, it's almost like a dream, isn't it? That, you can, well, for us, we can provide a candidate that primarily works from home most of the time. Whereas if you're used to, in my sense, I was used to recruiting people that you'd almost assume that the person would need to be on site. So if the customer is in Germany, for example, you'd be asking questions like, okay, when do you want the person to come on site? Monday? Yes. Okay. and when can they leave site. Usually it'll be a Thursday evening. Whereas you guys, you've been doing this for 10 years. So question for you, do you think you're in pole position? Or perhaps you could say you're in pole position. You've been doing the same thing as what you're going to have to do now, all of the partners. And of course, not all of the partners have always offered that remote working opportunity. How easy has that been for a transition for you guys?
Yeah, good question, Lloyd. I mean, I think my background, similar to yours, was PeopleSoft, Oracle. There's big, on-prem ERP systems. So I was used to being on site, camping out in the customer's office and a go live 2-week period, etc. So it was a shock to me as well when we first started doing Workday and realized that the model was very different. And I think, to me, again, it's been interesting over the last 10 years. The kind of early adopters, those customers who came in very early, they got the model. They were really keen. They wanted Workday at all costs. They saw it. They were drinking the Kool-Aid. They were jumping on the bandwagon, and they were fine. Remote working, all the rest of it. They got it pretty quickly. Then we went into this period, and I think a lot of the big SIs came on board as well, and their model is built around guys on seat, backing up the graduate bus. Bunch of people in a room. They can charge a lot of money for that. It's a great model. Don't get me wrong. It works really well, but it's a different model. So us and some of the other Workday boutiques were just following Workday's lead and saying, well, we can do this remotely. We can do all of it remotely. You're only asking for some of it. We'll be on site for that FaceTime. So yeah, it was pretty easy for us to adapt to that. Does that put us in a pole position? I think us and the other boutiques, absolutely, because we can do this now. And interestingly, the customer conversations since lockdown, it's flipped again from the not can you provide people on site to are you sure you can do all this remotely? So we've changed a lot of our kind of wording and our talk track around that as well.
I guess historically you've been doing most of it remotely anyway. So would that question necessarily come up? It would be that, well, we've already done this implementation for all of these customers and we did that primarily remotely. So it's just a shift into things like training sessions and etc. The stuff that typically you would have been on site for, workshops and things.
And I think to Matt's point though too, Lloyd, it's not us, it's also our customers, right? And to Matt's point, if you're a large organization that have gone through an Oracle implementation, SAP, whatever major ERP, you're used to it a certain way. And so I think where we find the challenge is, sometimes we do more on site to help our clients, kind of meet in the middle, so to speak. And I think Matt hit it perfectly. It's a change management discussion. How are we going to learn? How do people get information? How do we test? How do we train? All the things that we've been talking about. So a lot of our time is spent with that discussion, to Matt's point. How, we're educating clients and customers looking to deploy it on how they can take the best, approach and the most advantage that they can of a cloud-based technology. And, knowing now they don't need to be in office to access the system because the system isn't, installed on the hard drive of the PC in their office. It's accessible through obviously the internet. So they could technically be anywhere. So I think a lot of it is that. It's, how do you, client, feel comfortable with our working approach? And we do a lot of that education now in the sales process.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to open it up to Q&A, and I've got a few questions here to ask you guys before we move on to what you need to do differently in the tools and approach, which is topic 2. So we've got a question here. Workday being a cloud platform, have you had to operate any projects differently apart from the obvious face-to-face internal and client meetings?
Go first, Matt. You want me to go first?
Yeah, you go. I think you touched on it earlier with our internal one.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it's the same, methodology, talk about high level phasing of Workday programs, the iterative prototype approach, all of that stays the same. So if you're looking at it from that high level view, not much changes. I think the biggest impact, we see with clients kicking off programs now is really the start, right? What you need to spend extra time around is really focused on how you develop some of those relationships and how you keep folks engaged in a remote model. So if you think about traditional approach, everybody's coming on site, you're kicking off, you're doing your traditional architecture, discovery, whatever you call it, to really gather requirements, meet the team, start those relationships and kind of expectations around working structure. that has to shift remote. And so what we have seen is obviously organizations start to use tools to have a quicker accessibility to consultants. So things like Slack or WebEx Teams or Skype, whatever it might be from an instant messaging platform. But what we've also seen is a spreading out of the work. So all of us know, yeah, I mean, Matt, you made a good point about, our partners at home or children running in the background screaming. I'm actually surprised my daughter isn't yelling in the background right now, but we all have those distractions at work. So the concept of we're going to go, hey, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., we're going to be all day in a big workshop, that's gone. So what we are seeing is spreading out, say a 4-hour session is now, a 2-hour session over 2 days. That way we can keep that engagement, we can keep folks working and focused on the task at hand. That's probably the biggest change. Instead of the 1 day on site, 2 days on site, we're spreading that out to keep people engaged, because we also remember everybody's got their day jobs that they have to do. And, they might be dropping off the kids or taking the dog for a walk or doing something else at home. So it's less confined by that 9 to 5 and more, a broader time frame of a week to 2 to get our stuff done. So we do see clients doing stuff at night after the kids are asleep. We see them, doing stuff over the lunch break instead, where, typically that's let's all go out to lunch and leave the office. So those are probably the biggest 2 changes we've seen. But I don't know, Matt, if you'd add on.
No, I think that hits everything, Thomas. Yeah, might comment a little bit more on the tools in a second.
Yeah. Okay. Being a global partner, have you seen a downturn in all locations that you operate in? For example, in the countries that are less impacted, like Thailand and Singapore, has the impact been the same in the UK and the US?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on this earlier. So we've got a big operation out in Singapore. That was hit early, a lot earlier than it was here in Europe and in the US as well. So we saw the impact as a business quite early on internally. And then as it hit in Spain, we've got a big delivery center down in Granada. We've got big teams in Italy. So it's kind of the virus hotspots kind of hit different places. We see that impact dramatically happen. From a customer perspective, I mean, the majority of our customers are global customers, the operations everywhere as well. So again, we saw them, if the project was based in Europe and they had operations in the Far East, it didn't really hit the project. But if the project was based in France, say, as France kind of hit fairly early as well, then we did see an impact there. So again, it was interesting to watch it kind of hit, almost like a map on the news. You see that going through.
It's like a domino effect, wasn't it, at first?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And I think conversely as well, as countries have come out of lockdown, we've seen activity happen a lot quicker there. So Germany, for example, we've seen a lot of activity there. People are going back to offices. Netherlands as well. I had a video call about 4 weeks ago with a customer in Netherlands, and they were actually in the office doing a meeting. I was like, wow, this is amazing. How are you there? And they were, sitting 2 desks apart from each other, but they were able to be in the office. And I think, again, you've seen that economic activity to start up at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. The market certainly has. Any projects that were paused, or most projects that were paused, at least there's a conversation happening about when they're going to start, whereas a few weeks ago it was just, you just didn't know what you didn't know. I can understand that. Question number 3, and we've got quite a few questions, which I will get to all of these questions, guys, but some of these questions are very related to the tools area, so we'll wait until we go through topic 2. Question number 3 is, I assume that greenfield implementations have taken a hit during this time. Have you seen a rise in Phase X implementations and AMS requests, with clients taking this time to address their backlog of items? Good question.
If I hit AMS, and Thomas, you might be better placed to do the Phase X one. So I think from an AMS perspective, we support an awful lot of customers in the ecosystem. And we saw very similar things coming in from them. It was kind of, how do I set up new absence plans? Because we want to track COVID as a particular thing. Can you help us do some reporting on it? How can we send some new codes over to payroll? Because actually, we're going to put people on furlough. So we had some very, specific requests come through the AMS channels, and that was quite consistent across a lot of different businesses. So yeah, I mean, our AMS business has been going from strength to strength and, doing really well throughout this. And I think as well, organizations, they've had people, forced off on leave, or, heaven forbid, they've actually been off sick and suffering from COVID as well. So, you know, we have seen customers whose their own internal support team have kind of been out of the game. So they've come to us for some, you know, additional resource and support with that. So certainly an uptick in that.
Yeah, and then the phase X side, I think what we've seen a lot of is, you know, mergers and acquisition. I mean, you know, it's no surprise there's going to be winners and losers from an industry perspective coming out of this pandemic. And so what we have seen is mergers and acquisitions. So we have actually seen a lot of companies looking at expanding the footprint. Not, I would say, so much in adding a substantial amount of net new SKUs from Workday. That has happened, but I would say, you know, it's kind of that correlation versus causation trend. I don't think it's directly related personally, but we have seen, I would say, geographical expansion based on acquisitions happening. And also to Matt's point, larger expansion of kind of maybe consolidation or footprint. So there are some companies that are furloughing. There's companies that are, you know, looking to cut, refocus maybe on more profitable business lines, right? So think about if you're a restaurant, you know, not doing a lot of dine-in anymore, right? You're doing a lot of delivery of food to houses and those sort of things. So we have seen a lot of those kind of phase X restructuring on the finance side of, you know, hey, we're really looking at moving towards adaptive insights. You know, we want to move towards a continuous planning environment to help us reforecast revenue away from in-room dining and, you know, coming into the restaurant versus our delivery business. And we want to understand how we're profitable this new line of business. So I would say we've seen that, and it's a speed play. So where we've been helping our clients is they need to react very, very quickly, right? Because, you know, they're trying to survive as an organization for those that are heavily impacted. And so, yeah, we have seen those pick up as well.
Yeah. Some industries have just gone through the roof, haven't they? And then other industries, airlines and things like that. I mean, it will all come back. But it must be very, very tough for some organizations throughout this period, you know?
Definitely.
Okay. So thanks for covering those points, guys. We'll move on to topic 2. So the title of topic 2 we want to talk about is, what do you do differently in a Workday implementation now? How do you propose to do your implementations for a customer in a different way than what you was doing before? And I know that in your case, it's only a little bit different because you was doing it in that way in the first place, which in my opinion does put you in a very, very good position moving forward. What sort of tools and approach do you need to be aware of for customers, and what the customers need to think about? Whether it's going to be Alight Solution doing the implementation or someone else, what do they need? What do we all need to think about?
Yeah, again, I think you know, kind of hit on this earlier a little bit, that this is what people are used to now. You know, everyone is doing video conferences day in, day out. I mean, you know, some of us are a bit sick of doing 8 hours of video conferencing, but it's the new normal to use that phrase. As long as you're a pro, mate, you can carry on forever. And I think everyone's got their favorite. You know, some people evangelize Zoom and say it's got to be Zoom. We don't want to use WebEx. Some people say it's got to be Microsoft Teams, whatever. The tools are relevant, frankly. I think, you know, every tool has its pros and cons. They do a job. Some do it better in certain ways. Some do it better in others. But I think Thomas hit it really well earlier, that a session where we would have had, you know, 8 hours in a room, we'd have gone out for breaks, we'd have done lunch as a team, that kind of stuff. Lots of whiteboarding, lots of conversations, all the rest of it. You can't do that. You just simply cannot have the people to focus for that amount of time using video conference technology. So it's about breaking it up into meaningful chunks. You know, if you've had, maybe there are 20 people who would have attended in the room and they all had, you know, a piece to play. There might be subject matter experts, or they might be country leads, or, you know, whatever their role is. It's just not going to work in a video conference environment. So let's split that up. Maybe we'll have, you know, 4 people for an hour session going really deep, really detailed, get all the information out. Then we play that back to the rest of the group, and then we have another 4 in the afternoon. So it's about just being more creative with the kind of the ways and the means of doing it. And I think the two points that's really key is one, in those design sessions in that architect phase, and also in the testing as well. And again, it depends what the approach to testing is for the organization. You know, some people like to have everyone in a room together, just, you know, plugging away, going through test scenarios, raising their hand, they've got a problem, we'd walk over and talk to them. That's not feasible. So, you know, maybe you have a dedicated slot. So at 3 p.m. every day, we're going to have a procurement call to go through every issue about procurement. Everyone is involved in procurement from our side, from the customer side, get on that call, answers it, there's follow-ups and there's directions as well. But rather than everyone kind of attending and just being a bit of a waste of time, just have really detailed sessions for the individual different areas. So for me, I think that's more important. It's the process rather than the tools.
Right.
The quality versus quantity of meetings, right? Yeah, have the meetings, make sure you're 100% there. I would say, though, it doesn't take away from some of the fun, right? You know, and I think the kind of water cooler, coffee chat part where we develop a lot of relationships with our customers. There's a lot of different ways to do that, to gain some personal engagement, to enjoy working together. So I think delineating that, to Matt's point, around let's have a meeting that we're all 100% here and focused on task at hand, a smaller group to make sure we're as effective as possible. Hey, let's do a virtual happy hour on Friday where we can actually talk and exchange stories. We're seeing a lot of that as well, whether it's, we're going to do a trivia, we're going to, have a pint with each other on the phone while we're talking. Those are sort of things as well we definitely recommend because, it's the same as always. You're spending 12 months or 6 months or 9 months or whatever it might be working with a team. You want to develop those relationships and enjoy what you do. So we are seeing a lot more of that as well. Is kind of separating those where you would traditionally get in a big meeting, to Matt's point, 20 people in the room, there's going to be walk in for 5 minutes. Hello, how are you? What did you do this weekend? Separating that out to give people an outlet to have those kind of personal conversations as well is important to make sure there's more of a personal connection established.
Yeah, I think
I think just to follow up on that, you asked earlier about projects we'd started and then switch into an offsite model within COVID. And I think we did see a difference, with a traditional kind of project startup, it's all about getting to know people. It's all about that kind of time in a room, maybe the team going out for dinner. You build relationships, you get to know, you like this football team or whatever. You do miss some of that. So again, to Thomas's point, how can you put some of those social aspects back in? You do a 2-hour slot of detailed design work, but then you have an hour slot where we're all just chatting on a call, talking about social things and just non-work stuff, just to build up some of that rapport that you otherwise miss. I think that's really key. And the projects that we started completely within this lockdown period, we've had to do a lot more of that.
Yeah. The projects that you started in this lockdown period was, I probably know the answer to this question, but I'd be interested to hear what you say. Customers who are starting a project in what is a pandemic, what sort of apprehensions did they have, if at all?
Yeah, and I think it does vary from customer to customer and different personalities. I mean, apprehensions are, we're in a worldwide pandemic. Nobody really knows what's going to happen in 6 months. So I think for me, the overriding apprehension is around that. It's not so much the fact that, they bought Workday, that's a great system, they're going to be sorted with that. They've chosen Alight, fantastic, we do a good job, here's a bunch of references. So once you kind of get them on board and you can prove that we know what we're doing and the model works, that's fine. I think there are bigger issues out there for customers than worrying about this, to be honest.
Would you do like a sweep on separate hardware that the customer has? So, how are we going to do these calls? And, how set up are you for these calls? And what sort of projects have you run so far or in the past where you've had this sort of model?
We would do what we would call like a project readiness engagement with a customer, right? Where, to your point, we would be including additional topics. How are we working together? What tools are we using? All of that, it's kind of the expectation concept. So that's definitely changed, right? To your point, to Matt's point, when it was mid-project, it was how do we figure this out? Scrambling, business as usual, let's pivot. New clients are much more thoughtful in that approach, and there's a lot more time spent where you would traditionally be spending on, okay, what weeks are going to be on site? What's our project plan? We're doing the project planning and all those things as well. American expression, I would say the blocking and tackling part, but the same concept. Now we're also talking about how we're going to work together. What tools are we going to use? I think that part is definitely more prevalent up front. The other thing too, I'd add just Matt about what Matt had said for the last question. I think the thing that we're seeing as well, there are still plenty of customers out there that need to move. They have an upgrade of a major application. They have to go. And so they're doing something. So we are still seeing those companies move forward with projects. I think what we're seeing is customers that didn't have a compelling reason, especially those that might be in retail, hospitality, you mentioned airlines, the ones that are severely affected as a business. have, different priorities that are more important in the interim state. So I think for those folks, they're not doing projects. The others, I don't think it's an apprehension to go. Matt kind of hit on it. It's more about how do we do this? We have to do something. Maybe we have a major SAP upgrade coming, right? Or maybe we have something that we have to do. We got to do something. Let's figure it out. So those are all still moving forward. It's just kind of a, we're solving problems in any typical program. It's just a different problem we're having to solve. Yeah.
I guess you found it was the impact, or customers would find it was the impact of not knowing that this was coming, because no one knew this was coming. And then in reality, where everyone is working from home, you're not set up for it. And you need to pull a report, but you've got an on-premise solution, so you can't, or something that doesn't support you pulling that report working from home. So
yeah, exactly. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And I think, again, looking back 10 years, the cloud model was being questioned, the SaaS delivery was being questioned. People were nervous about it. Certainly in Thomas's space, finance CFOs. Yeah. That's all taken its head. Everyone's saying that, we've got to do this now. Why aren't we? Why have we still got a server in the basement that we're relying on, with 14 people we need in the office to actually keep the lights on here? So for me, it's kind of just making its own business case.
Yeah. One of the questions, actually more from me, and we've got quite a few questions loading up here, so I'll move on to those as well. There's been a number of customers that we've worked with, and some in kind of heavy in the defense market. And when we as an organization have placed freelancers on those projects before, and every customer historically would like that person to be on site, because that made them feel more comfortable seeing their face and everything like that. That was historically what we were used to. And even though the trust had been built up by those freelancers, they still required them to be on site because of the nature of the industry. You could not be remote, because you could not sign into their VPN connection, because it's a defense company. It's got secretive data and things like that. So what would happen in these circumstances moving forward for an organization like that?
Yeah, I think we've seen a couple of them over the years. And again, to my earlier point, they've already gone cloud. They've done that. Their data is now in the cloud. They get the model. They understand it's secure. It's more secure than it was previously, with people putting USB sticks and leaving them on trains, etc. So it's almost like those days have gone. Now, there are additional layers of securities. You can get into Workday and connection via VPN, etc. So what we've actually seen with some of our customers that are very either in the defense sector or very big on defense for espionage reasons, they've actually provided us their own secure laptops. Now, they know our consultants are working at home, and they've had them posted out by secure delivery. They've signed for it, etc. The consultant can only access their tenant through that laptop that connects to the VPN. So those kind of things that customers are dealing with it. Their own staff are working from home now because they're not allowed to be in the office. So they've had to fix this problem, and almost the result is, now it's going to be easier for us all to do work for them, because they've proved the model.
Yeah. It's accelerated that transition, Lloyd, right? Like what Matt's highlighting. I think on finance is probably the best representation of that. HR has embraced this model for a decade. Finance is really just getting going, especially in certain regions, and has lagged behind because apprehension to the cloud, data security, privacy, kind of all, a variety of things, and just in nature, a more apprehensive group as it relates to change. This is highlighted to Matt's point. You have to do it. So, I know on a regular basis, I'm having conversations with our clients about their business continuity planning. If you think about most organizations' business continuity planning, no one had a line for pandemic, right? You might have had a natural disaster that you could, I live in Miami, Florida, in the United States. We have hurricanes. So we're ready for 2 to 3 weeks, no power, those sort of things. That's a normal thing for us. Depending on where you're in the world, no one's thinking, pandemic, we can't access our office. How do you actually maintain business as usual? And I think to Matt's point, this is something that's just pushed it very quick to make organizations focus on it and prove it out as they have. And now I think it's to Matt's point, there's creative ways that you can access, kind of behind the firewall, and companies are embracing that more often. So it's less of a if, more of a when now, I would say, for finance as well as anybody trying to work in a remote environment.
Yeah. We've got a question, so I want to move on to the questions here. So I'll pick a few. Have any of your projects been postponed or delayed or cancelled due to COVID, and how has that impacted the growth plans of the business?
So yeah, I think we've seen all sorts. As we said, we've seen additional business that we weren't expecting to have. We've seen projects put on hold. We've seen projects that have kind of gone long and thin. You know, we're expecting to do it in 6 months, but the customer said, "Okay, I don't want to lose momentum. I want to keep things going." So we've stretched that out to maybe a 9-month project with less people working on it. Yeah. Has that impacted our growth? I mean, you know, like everyone, absolutely. We're not. You said it very well at the start, Lloyd. You know, 2020 was going to be a big year for us. We haven't foreseen that. We're halfway through the year. We're in a global pandemic, so everything is really just in ticking over state at the moment.
Yeah, but it will come.
I'd add, Lloyd, just certain industries, I would say we're seeing a different impact, right? So, you know, we mentioned this a couple times, but yeah, we definitely have clients in, you know, hospitality, hotels, retail, you know, those organizations that are looking at, you know, staying alive, so to speak, until things can reopen. I think the comical thing for me is it's 2020. I remember New Year's, there was all the jokes about wearing the 2020 vision glasses and stuff. And who could have had the foresight to actually, you know, understand that this was coming? So the pause, I think, has happened a lot with companies that say, you know, I just want to look and understand cash flow. I want to be ready if this continues. Are we as an organization ready for 12 months of, you know, decreased revenue? To Matt's point, so we have seen a lot of that spreading, slower projects, keeping momentum as well. But yeah, some industries are obviously more affected than others, and have put a pause because they obviously have a higher priority in the interim.
Well, I hope the bounce. I'm certainly seeing the bounce. You know, the interest in doing something as an organisation that probably, you know, organisations weren't looking to do something for another 6 to 12 months and wouldn't have done something for 6 to 12 months if this hadn't have happened. So the bounce opportunity, I think, is huge. I think a lot of companies will go to the cloud, even though they weren't thinking of going to the cloud for many years in the future.
Yeah,
I think it's, you know, dare I say it, there is a positive to all this negativity. Very, very good question here by Paul Honeyfield. What factors, in your opinion, that COVID has brought us will be built into the Workday technology stack going forward?
Great question. Well, we just put up the safe harbor statement, don't we? Because everything we say now is safe harbored from Workday. I mean, I think I've seen a number of customers asking for things, you know, certain reports we talked about earlier, you know, maybe a quicker way to kind of add on things, you know, for absence reporting, that kind of stuff. I think I'm not completely up to speed with the latest brainstorms, but I think, you know, just focus on brainstorms, get onto the community site, put your requests into Workday. They're pretty good at actually reviewing those and adopting those. Thomas, anything on the finance side you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, as Workday acquired Adaptive Insights, you know, I think on the finance side, what we are seeing a lot of is just that expansion of process, and it all ties back to reporting, to Matt's point. So a lot of companies are wanting different types of reports, you know, different slicing and dicing of an existing report, because, you know, every you know, CEO is looking for insights into the business, whether it's to give to investors or as employees. So I think a lot of the things that I'm seeing on the finance side is really, as Workday and Adaptive Insights technologies come closer together. You know, think about some of the interconnectivity of business process design, the integrations for metadata. So think about, you know, hey, we're going to start a new department. Like, I'll go back to that restaurant example. We're going to solely focus 70% of our revenue on, you know, delivering food to people's houses, right? So we need to create drivers. I need to create job profiles, those sort of things. So I think we're starting to see those come together, because one of the big things we're seeing is that continuous planning. I know us as an organization, we're on a week to 2 week reforecasting of revenue plan, right? We look at it much quicker than a quarterly or monthly. because obviously our investors, our C-suite, they want a better insight into what parts of the business are doing well or not, so that they can act quicker. So I think that's what we're seeing, is a lot of just expansion of bringing those two together. And you'll see that through the next couple of releases as well, is just expansion of the capability to initiate processes between those two applications as they come together. Again, safe harbor, Matt said it perfect, but that's what I'm seeing.
Okay, so we've got another question here. Do you think that remote working is going to be the new way of working going forward, even after COVID? Do you think companies think saving office space cost is a big win with remote working?
Oh, these are tough questions, Lloyd. I thought, yeah, hitting us with all the big philosophical ones. I think there will be questions asked. I mean, there have to be. You know, the traditional approach to hundreds of people going into big cities across the world at the same time every day to sit in big offices, expensive offices, you know, expensive environmental impact, all that kind of stuff. I think it proved that that's not always needed. Now, you know, I'm sure I'm like everyone, that I'm missing that. I'm missing that time in the office, chatting to people. Do I need it every day? Absolutely not. But, you know, am I thinking I can't wait to get back to the office even for a couple of times a month? Absolutely. So I think we will probably see more flexible working, more the kind of office space where you can just rent something, you know, by the day, jump in, drop out. You've got a team meeting, I need 12 people in an office space, and we've only got room for 4. So I think for me, it's going to be more about flexibility than not doing it at all.
Yeah.
And I think I'd add on, just because it's very topical. I think it's Barbados as a company, or as a country in the Caribbean, is offering a 12-month come and work remote, you know, and they'll equalize some of your taxes. So I mean, I had a nice conversation with my wife about that. Yeah, I'll sign up for that. Let's go. I think there's still some challenges around taxation between cities and countries and states, depending on where you are in the world, that needs to be solved for organizations to move towards a full remote work model. But I think to Matt's point, you know, that concept of here's my cubicle, I'm in the office every day, 9 to 5, dealing with a commute, living in a higher cost location like London, New York City in the US, those sort of things. I do think, to Matt's point, this has highlighted that it's not a requirement. Or I think organizations will define their own organizational strategy. There's a lot of tech companies that have already come out and said they're not coming back to the office till January of next year. So I do think, you know, you'll see some of, you know, companies take different approaches to attract talent. I think the only thing I could foreshadow is there'll be some change. What that is, who knows?
Yeah. Tell you guys a story actually from my past. When I was heavy into the SAP recruiting market, this was probably 9-10 years ago. There was a big customer that I won in Germany, bread making organization they were, and I placed over 120 contractors on that project. And the sort of contractors that, or the customer themselves, insisted that people were on site. So they didn't care where you lived. They would insist that you was in the office from Monday to Thursday, and you could work from home on the Friday as long as you did your 40 hours in those 4 days. So they were doing 10 hours a day. And you can imagine those sort of contractors were charging expenses. And I tell you why I'm bringing this up. One particular contractor of mine didn't put his expenses in for around 10 months. They were there for a few years. So you can imagine the level of expenses. And I had 120 guys on this project. Every one of them was putting their expenses in every single month. But this particular guy, he just put it in, you know, maybe once a year. But I think it was 10 months expenses. The expenses were in excess of 50K. So if you take into consideration all the expenses of all of those other people that were going to be on site, I think it's a no-brainer for companies to move forward. Even when we do come out of COVID, which we will, and things will go back to normal, the flexibility of not having to have someone on site, whether it's an internal member of staff or a consulting partner, doesn't really matter. It's going to give companies the opportunity to save so much money and invest back into their systems rather than in expenses. Just something that you might be interested from my past there.
History lesson. It's always good.
A few more questions here. Have you found many Workday professionals transferring skills across from HCM to financials, with the financial solution gaining more traction?
That's one for you, Thomas.
I would say yes, absolutely. So I've been in the space for almost 10 years, I mentioned before, and I remember where it was like, Workday signed client number 5, and now they signed number 10. Now we're getting close to 900, almost 1,000 Workday Financials customers in the ecosystem, and Workday publicized their growth rate in that 70% year over year. So yes, I would say we absolutely are. Now, certain areas require a different set of skills that are not transferable, right? If you're going to work around core general ledger design, you probably have an accountant background or have worked in some sort of accounting. You're not good with numbers. It's probably not a good spot for you. But things like reporting, report development, you think about dashboarding, you think about technical integrations, all of those, absolutely. If you can design a business process and build, conditional rules or custom validations in Workday, that's across HR and financial. So we are seeing some of that. Some of the skill sets, as I mentioned, just aren't transferable because you're not having a conversation around absence plans, or you're having a conversation around compensation structure. You're having a conversation around how maybe a company manages consolidation across multi-currency, right? It's just a very different conversation. You need to have that skill set. But I would say yes, we are seeing that for sure happen, and it's definitely something that we're seeing the growth on the finance side as well.
Okay, all right. Jonathan here asks, are you predicting a backlog of projects? Those that have hit pause for now, do you get a sense that they'll be back, or will go back through the RFP process again?
Okay. Yes, we're expecting a lot of activity. I mean, we've seen a lot of prospective customers who we were talking to and expecting to sign in Q2. Those have been paused. Those have been moved out to Q3, Q4. So I think we haven't seen them disappear. They're just moving to the right. Specifically, projects that have paused. I mean, I think it depends on where they are. Was it a phase X of something that they maybe don't need? Maybe it's implementing a recruitment module and they're not planning on doing recruiting for 2 years. Clearly there's no point in restarting that. But where they are, halfway down the track with a project with a particular partner, we expect them to carry on. We expect them to probably need to relook at what's left to do and how they can do it, and what timeframes there are. But absolutely, we're talking to a lot of our customers at the moment about when they can restart and when things can happen, and looking at doing some kind of in-phase readiness as well to make sure that they're up to speed and they're ready to go with it. So yeah, absolutely.
Super. We've got a few more, but we've also got topic 3 to cover as well. So I think we'll go on to topic 3, and then I'll try and go back to as many of these questions as I possibly can. So topic 3, what's remained the same? So methodology, deliverables, timings, those types of things. What's not changed at all?
I'd say all of that, really. I mean, the Workday methodology is what we follow as a Workday partner. That hasn't changed at all. The deliverables haven't changed at all. The approach, we talked already about, that's moved and changed around. Some of those sessions we've cut up. But I think one thing that we need to be very clear on is this isn't an excuse to make a 6-month project last 12, or delay a testing phase because it's done remotely. We're still expecting to hit the aggressive timeframes that we've always done and come in, on time for customers. I think people can be very comfortable with that this is pretty normal for us. We talked at the very beginning, one of the first things you said was we were already doing 70%, 80% offsite. So, for us as an organization, this is really just business as usual. And I think for customers as well, actually now coming out the end of this, they get it. They get that remote side of things. So nothing should really change. Thomas, you got any specifics on that?
No, I think spot on. I think it's one of those areas that people anticipate a much larger amount of change. It's all the same. It's just using different tools to get to the same outcome.
Yeah. Okay. the 100% model moving forward, of course, with everything being done remote. I think that's a really good move. Do you think depending on whether it's a HCM or a financials implementation that you would have to do, is there more need, do you feel, that you'd be pushing to try and get back on site for that maybe 10-20% when COVID is gone? Is there a difference between HR and finance for your customers?
So I'll give my perspective. It's definitely an American expression, but I always describe HR and finance. HR is typically a mile wide and 10 feet deep, right? So if you think about rolling out HR application, you obviously meeting with managers, understanding, what the business needs. But, for the most part, how it touches the broader organization is, people want to check their paycheck. They want to request time off, right? There's a few things that the broader organization is interacting with the system. Finance, it's 10 feet wide, a mile deep, right? Because most finance, if you're in accounting, etc., you're working all day in Workday. All you do, right? You're processing invoices, you're running, journal transactions, whatever it might be. So there's a different level of expertise required that is facilitated through that knowledge transfer of working on a giant program like a Workday ERP deployment. So what I would say is on the finance side, I imagine that there will be a push to come back on site. Because, if I'm doing the normal task, everybody can pick that up. But in finance, you got to learn exception 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You got to learn a much deeper level of understanding of how to use the system. And I think a lot of that just comes with time and interaction and practice, so on and so forth. And just the way that I've seen most finance individuals work, I think there will be a push for finance to come back on site quicker than HR. Obviously, payroll is kind of, if you think of historically, Workday would put payroll kind of on the HR side, but obviously payroll in a lot of organizations rolls up through finance. So payroll is the one that I would say, if you assume it's on the HR side, I think that could have a comeback quicker. If it's on the finance side, I would lump it right into that same category there.
Yeah. Is that your?
Yeah, I think I would just add to that for me, it's not a difference between HR and finance. I think it depends on the customer. If they're a global customer with people dispersed everywhere, then they can't do that. They can't have everyone in one place anyway. So they're used to that global working. They're absolutely fine with it. Maybe where it's a smaller organization or they've got more people concentrated in a single place, then they might want us on site. And, you know me, Lloyd, I'm a people person. I like that interaction anyway.
Very much
the individual.
Yeah. Sam Trapol here asked a question, probably associated more to topic 2, but I'll ask it anyway. How do you replace the chats and insights that you would normally gain with chats at the coffee machine?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big misses.
They always say there's a saying, right? Most business is done on the golf course, and
at the pub, right?
we obviously, I can't play golf, so but it's true. A lot of we can't go on the golf course. We can't do that at the moment. So and the things that we're so used to as human beings in business, we just have that 5-minute, 10-minute chat at the coffee machine. How are we gonna get to where we need to get to through our systems, do you think?
So I think we did touch a little bit on this, and it's about doing some of those social activities, maybe breaking out and doing a quiz at lunchtime. Now, it's not the same as one-on-one next to a coffee machine, but at least it's social. You get to know people. Also, we really encourage just, the particular leads from a business and a subject matter expert having one-on-one conversations with our equivalent lead, just to get to know each other, have some of those detailed conversations, but also just, did you watch it on TV last night? And, what have you been up to at the weekend? Some of those more human interactions that we're missing at the moment. I think that's so important. And if you can get those one-on-one conversations, you start getting a rapport built up, you start getting to know people. Then you come back and the following Monday, I see your football team won, or, that you can just start those conversations, start being more human with them without that face-to-face.
Won the Premier League.
You are?
I see your football team won the Premier League.
Apparently someone did. A bit late. Thomas has no idea what we're talking about.
Soccer, right? We're talking about soccer? I'm just kidding.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Liverpool won the Premier League, Thomas. Okay. I think there's one more question here. that I'll ask it. Feel free not to answer. In the next 10 years, do you expect Workday to be global with modules supporting all global country payrolls and a one-stop solution like other providers, having CRM, supply chain, and other modules?
Yeah, it's very difficult to answer questions like that when we're not, with Workday. I mean, I think, to be honest, Workday have stated publicly that they're not going to release any more payrolls. Now, who's to say that things don't change and they change their engine and make it easy, whatever. But I personally would be very, very surprised if we see certainly global payroll coming out of them. They might decide actually they want to release a particular payroll in a particular country to go after that market, but I don't think we will. Regarding other modules and systems, I mean, Workday are very, very smart the way they go to market. They go after what makes sense, what their customers are asking for, and what they know they can sell. So if they see a need, if they see something they can build into their tools and they can integrate with the rest of their system, absolutely they're going to do it. And they're going to go at that very methodical way, as we've seen in the past. They've acquired businesses and they've kind of built the technology in rather than just lump it together. So I think we'll probably see more of that as well.
We are already,
on the finance side,
we are already some smaller supply chain type modules on finance already, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so, Workday's been very open about two plays on the finance side, which is country specific. So the regulatory compliance piece, I think, a couple of years back, we deployed Workday Financials at Aon, which is in, over 100 countries at the time. And, when we started with the first 70, and 45 had never been done out of that 70. So we were on the cutting edge. So if I looked at that now, compared to then, you have electronic invoicing in a lot of countries in Europe, as well as statutory compliance for things like alternative account sets or, document sequencing in Italy. So Workday's definitely will continue to do that for financials, is to work capability, not to just do trial balance upload, but actually operationally run finance in country. And then to your point about industry. So Workday's been very vocal about which industries they're targeting. I would say supply chain is a little loose because right now it's non-consignment related. They're really looking at healthcare. As it relates to what they're building out within their inventory module. So I do believe that Workday will continue to enhance things like their accounting center being released in Prism, as well as others to enhance their financials product to be able to meet industry as well as country needs. The other applications, that I agree with Matt, I'm sure they will continue to acquire and or build applications that meet customers' requests. But yeah, it's hard to say if they're going to buy a Salesforce competitor or something of that nature, right, to handle the CRM side of the business.
Okay. Got a really, really nice question here, actually. I wondered when someone would ask this. One of our attendees asked, where can they get one of those bright yellow Alight shirts?
This is like an invite-only club, but send me a note. Happy to let you know. Matt's been trying to get his hands on one for years, and he's just stuck with the little yellow logo, unfortunately.
Yeah, I want the first one. I want the first one, please, guys. Extra large, extra large at the moment. Well, I think we've come to the end of our allotted time. So, final word from you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lloyd, first of all, for the invitation. I think it's been really, really useful. I mean, I think final word for me is, this is pretty much business as usual. We're starting to see various countries, various places come out of this pandemic. We're very geared up to embrace that, as is Workday as a technology. So we're looking forward to the next stage, the new normal that we keep hearing about, whatever that looks like. There'll be challenges, there might be another spike sometime in the future, but hey, we'll figure it out and we'll get there.
I think for me, it's just, cloud is here. Cloud is here to stay. I think we'll see a lot more companies move towards cloud-based technologies like Workday. I think, we talked about this a couple times. The pandemic has highlighted why organizations should be considering cloud-based technologies. And I think we'll see a very large recovery of, kind of the Workday implementation market. That might wait, I think, till Matt's point, until stuff stabilizes. There's a vaccine, whether that's 2021 or 2022. But I think this has highlighted a lot of organizations need to make the move. So I think this is a temporary setback in a lot of our minds for kind of the global domination that Workday's been planning.
Yeah, I think it's all positive. I think, like I said, there's been loads of negatives, but there's been loads of positives as well throughout this whole period. And I think it's only going to get more positive from this point of view, from this point in time. Sorry. So for those attendees, we will be sending an email asking for some feedback. Please be open and honest with any feedback that you have. We want to make sure that this webinar continues to grow and get better and better every time. For the next webinar, I've got a program director of a global end user who's coming on the webinar. And then next, I've actually managed to secure one of the other industry heavyweights, but from a program director contractual point of view. So really looking forward to the next couple of webinars. Thanks again to Matt and Thomas for spending the time to go through this stuff that we've spoken about. And thank you to everyone that's attended.